So you can't have a State of the State address that says we've got to make Maryland more business friendly and cheaper for families, but yet in a year and a half, the Moore administration has either he has signed or their administration has increased or signed bills raising taxes 338 times in a year and a half. And Governor Moore started the legislative session with his State of the State, where he talked about Maryland not being competitive economically, and Maryland not being a place that was affordable for families and I would say retirees and really anybody to live. If you're not extremely wealthy, or you're right now, it's a tough place to live. If you're middle class, even upper middle class, the effects of the economy, the Biden economy, or not the inflation that's out of control, it's impacting everybody in the country. But in Maryland, we're especially squeezed. The governor actually talked about it. He didn't mention the Biden economy. The governor talked about a lot of those issues, but then most everything he rolled out, not everything, he had some things that he pushed for that I thought were good and tried to work with their administration on. But for the most part, everything that they were coming into the Senate Finance Committee that I sent on, where we get a lot of the business regulation legislation, everything that comes in from their agencies and from a lot of my Democratic colleagues was going to add regulations. It was going to add fees and tax and add costs to doing business. And every time somebody comes in with a story about how there's some bad story about something that happened in one business, so now we have to change the law for everything, it's an additional regulate. So you can't have a State of the State address that says we've got to make Maryland more business friendly and cheaper for families, but yet in a year and a half, the Moore administration has either he has signed or their administration has increased or signed bills raising taxes 338 times in a year and a half. By comparison, Martin O'Malley, who was so bad on those issues that's why we got a Larry Hogan, frankly, as governor, he only had about 80, I think we counted 83 fee and tax increases in his 8 years, which was a lot. It was a lot. Now, a lot of these fees are not, a lot of stuff is not bills that have passed through. A lot of it is administrative fees that have gone up, license fees, parking fees at BWI, tolls, fines. Sometimes it's a fine, but it's one thing to increase a fine slightly over every few years, but to double and triple fines for minor business infractions is not good. And so the rhetoric doesn't match the results right now. So coming out of session, the big news also was that the governor and frankly the Senate in general, Senate Democrats and Republicans said we don't want to have tax increases. We had a little bit of a budget deficit for this year, and it was, and actually the budget that was introduced by the governor was pretty tame. It was actually spent less money than the year before. I wouldn't have done everything in the budget the way he did it, but it was okay. And he said we don't need to raise taxes, at least not this year. At the end of the day, the House of Delegates tried to ram through over $3 billion in tax increases, things like adding the sales tax to services, raising corporate taxes, corporate business taxes. There were a number of other assortment of taxes. What we finally ended up with was, we turned away all those taxes, right? Well, still $400 million in mostly car registration tax increases. So most of you are going to be, or all of you, when you go to renew your car registration, are going to be paying at least double, and in some cases more than double. They also, did things like dramatically increase fines for speeding in a construction zone, which on its face, you shouldn't be speeding, and you shouldn't be speeding in a construction zone, but they turn the cameras on and they leave them on all the time, whether there's construction going on or not. It's just more, it's more money grabs. And so if the rhetoric is it's too expensive to live here and we're not competitive economically in the private sector, we've got to do a better job of matching the rhetoric with actual results legislatively. And so this session, we did have success in turning away some what would have been very destructive tax increases, but they're going to be coming back. And I think it's so important. And I actually had the opportunity to be interviewed by Fox 45 last week, and they aired it Monday, a whole breakdown of Maryland Moody's, which does our bond rating, did not downgrade us from AAA, but it has downgraded our outlook to negative because in the out years of the next few years, we have massive budget deficits that are going to be developing.